weekend? Anything anybody care to share? Anything new, job prospects, travel, babies on the way? Investments, anybody made a huge sum of money over the weekend, some gambling, sports, nothing? Who do you think's gonna win the Super Bowl?
Eagles.
You got the Eagles? Yeah, I think so too. I had 49ers, but it works out. All right. How was the quiz? Not too rough, huh? Yeah. Okay. We'll keep that format going. Project objectives, right? So before we just kind of get like general ideas of what we're thinking about, some people are thinking about real companies that they want to start, which gives them a great opportunity here, figuring out how it all will work, what are the necessary steps to make it successful, what are some of the constraints and challenges that they foresee themselves having. And besides a great idea, we all have many of them, is it realistic? And if it's not realistic in how we see it, at least make it smaller to make it realistic, right? Because we want to make our dreams come true, but we also want to go step by step, right? I don't want to jump the gun. Remember, in success in business, I do not know any successful business person, ever. I know quite a bit. I know a few billionaires, like literally I know a few people that got $40 million penthouses downtown, like 40 million. None of them ever say I went into business to make money. They say I went into business to make something work, to make something I think people want, right? So it's always a mindset. But if you think in money, then you're always gonna be extremely realistic about what you can do, what you can't do. And that's not how business works, right? A lot of limitations, right, to things, money, resources, people, access to things. So part of this class is thinking realistically, like, hey, okay, I got a great idea, but where do I start? How do I plan it? How do I strategize? What's the process? What am I using? Am I using people? Am I using machines? Am I using AI? Am I using the internet? And what's the step-by-step process to that? So I can know how much everything costs. If I know everything costs, then I know how much to charge, right? Am I charging a luxury item where it costs $30 to make a shoe made in China? But I charge $5,000 because it says Louis Vuitton on the side, but it costs $30. Yeah, in which case you could do that. You're like, oh, that's my strategy. I'm sticking to it, that's what I'm doing, right? Or you just say, hey, you know, we upcharge 3% of what it actually costs to produce this good or sell it, you know? And that's what we do. So think of that in terms of, if it is some ideas that are, you know, you guys plan on making your real business, think of the realistic components to the process. So today, I want to see if I can get some volunteers talking about objectives. Right? You got your idea, wonderful idea. What's your objective for this thing? What do you hope to achieve by the end of the term, right? This semester. In terms of analyzing it, constraints, capabilities, all of the above. Right? Maybe it's just one thing you want to focus on about it. Like, hey, there's one little area I think I want to focus on about this wonderful idea, right? In terms of its process and how will it work. So who can I get to come up and talk about their objectives? Don't be shy now. Who hasn't come up here and spoke here? All right, who has an objective? Who has objective for their plan? You wanna come up here?
Yeah.
Try at it again. Sometimes it takes a person to come talk in front of other people to get comfortable about talking in front of people about anything is never easy because we're all intimidated and shy. I think we're gonna say something stupid or something. Right? But I teach psychology. This is my field. How you look at who you're presenting to, whether they matter because they haven't given you feedback, right? It's all about just your mental model of how you think about the people looking, right? You're just here to share your idea. That's it.
Alright, so all of you know about my idea for New World Wrestling, or NWW. So the main objective is to eventually be able to produce live events, presenting the more simplistic style pro wrestling. Not just live in person, but also on broadcast as well, because, well, the live aspect, by being there in person, really adds to the factor. Most of the time, you see sports, you know, at your home or on the couch. I mean, you're talking Super Bowl, and for the most part, all of you probably seen the games on TV. And I mean, for the show of hands, has anyone ever been to the Super Bowl?
All right.
Oh, lucky. But for the most part, we've been seeing the Super Bowl on TV, and broadcast is where it's at. So not just with presenting your product, but also how it is. So really, the end goal here is not just produce live events, but make sure it's also delivered to viewers who can't make it in person, and also have access to it through streaming, especially in today's world. That's my objective, one of the main objectives of the company.
Awesome. I like that, and that's probably your main objective, right? Because you're creating entertainment for people, so the number one thing you think about is how do I access, who are the suppliers of this access, right? YouTube, ESPN, or, you know, major corporation, pay-per-view, right? HBO, something like that. That makes sense. Any questions about his objective? All right, excellent. Short and sweet, 1 minute. You could just tell them, come up here and tell me your objective. Another volunteer. Yes.
So one of my main objective is that I want to help Netflix to keep its first position on the streaming market, as there is a lot of offers currently, and my idea is to really upgrade the proposition that they are currently doing by offering some like high experience stuff, team event and stuff, so that people can rebound with Netflix, because I know that many of people are kind of bored with what they're offering right now, so that will help recreate strength between the customer and the catalog they offer. So yeah, I think that's my main objective.
Makes sense. I think it's a good time to reflect and think of like the specificity of the area you guys are focusing on for your objectives. And maybe it's good for other people who haven't thought about it so far process. What about my cafe person? You wanna talk about like what your main objective is? Yeah.
So my idea would be to create a cafe around the Concordia University. So as I said, this idea came to my mind because I was thinking about what I like to do in France, and I like to go to a cafe where I can work or enjoy time with my friends. So my main objective here are to create an enjoyable, fancy cafe where people will feel like they are at home. I also want to bring the idea of being at home and also have a sustainable part. So I will try to create to have suppliers and have fair trade shopping. I don't know if everyone knows work with suppliers that are well paid and try to insist on this criteria, which is a very important thing, I think, and it could be very interesting in the sustainable part. And yeah, I think that's all my objective. Create like the main part is create an environment and an atmosphere around this cafe.
Now, your cafe, did you say it was gonna be located in Concordia?
No, around.
Around?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
And I think that could be a competitive advantage because there's no stuff like that around. Like, I mean, there's a Starbucks in Concordia, but around there is no, like, I mean, within walking distance, there is no cafe or restaurant. So I think that could be a nice idea.
Excellent. I like it. Thank you. All right, so think of cafe. Environment, right? So I've been to a lot of really posh cafes throughout Europe and other places, South America, stuff like that. And then you get Dunkin' Donuts, which I don't know if you count as a cafe, or probably just a coffee shop. You got Starbucks. You say, okay, environment, right? You want it super comfortable, right? But then maybe one of your issues maybe is too comfortable. Like, how come Dunkin' Donuts get these hard chairs? How come they don't look like Starbucks? They don't want you to lounge too long, right? They don't want you to stay too long so that more people can come in and out, and loitering may be an issue, right? And then you got neighborhood cafes like, no, that's not what we're about. We're about staying, right? Sit in that nice plush seat. You stay 6 hours, you come here every day, you're doing your work. Maybe we stay up in 24 hours because we're near a university. People gotta study for exams. And then Starbucks is somewhere in the middle. Yeah, you get people who do go to Starbucks and stay 5 hours, you know, people playing chess and stuff like that, which may not be an issue for the most part. But think of that kind of, some of the capacity for seating and how to get people in and out.
Yeah.
Available seating as well too.
I didn't mention it, but I wanted to do it takeaway and also dining.
Yeah. In which case, we'll kind of talk about like capacity and stuff there too, but that's an excellent example because sometimes it's overlooked, you know? Like the aesthetics of a restaurant is absolutely for a purpose, either to get people in and out quick or to get people to stay, right? And build lifelong relationships with customers and things like that. In which case you say, well, I created this particular cafe, let's say it's a neighborhood, because I don't want to be Starbucks. I don't want to be Dunkin' Donuts. I don't want to be a public company making billions of dollars with stockholders. I just want, you know what I mean? So you actually have an objective, who you are, your identity, and how far you're trying to go with it, you know? All right, maybe one more person who's brave enough to come talk about their objective. Force anybody, but try to think about it for Wednesday. Let's get some more brave souls up here. Excellent ideas. I like those ideas a lot. All right, capacity planning. All right, it's a lot of challenges is kind of how you think about this stuff because it can be intimidating when we think about all this strategy planning process. Kind of like you get lost in it. But really when you make it simple and you refer to maybe very, very common businesses, it becomes a lot more easier to understand in that way. Right, so we're talking capacity. What in essence is capacity? Right, for planning or for business. What does that encompass? What does that mean? Think of anything, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, a retail location, H&M, Zara, anything, yes?
Is it like the traffic that goes through the business?
Well, you could kind of say it's part of it is the movement, right? But literally think about it, just from a simple point of view, it's like, how much can we do, right? With what we have, just as simple. How much can we do with what we have? If you walk into Starbucks, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, like, oh my gosh, this line is long. I'm not sure if I'm staying, right? 'Cause I gotta go. You're like, oh, they didn't plan for this capacity, right? They don't have the number of workers somebody called off, 2 people called off. The Starbucks planned for people to call off. The Starbucks planned for a surge in the amount of people to show up at 8:30 a.m. That they have some redundancies built in the back, just in case, right? I'm gonna call, what's his name, so he can maybe try to come in real quick and live up the street, right? Maybe in the hiring thing, they saw people who live close. As a measure for hiring that person back, they could get here quick in case somebody calls them, right? Maybe a machine broke down, so now we're at a certain event, how are we gonna make the macchiato and have something different in it, or we're gonna run to the store across the street and get some stuff to make a mango or something. So if you think about it this way, and you can apply that to say, all right, Toyota makes all these cars, if one machine breaks down, what's the capacity to maybe, do we have another machine that's backup somewhere for parts we know they do break, or parts in the process we know they do get held up? This is all capacity planning. Like, how do you plan to maximize output based on all the resources you get? People, machines you get, location, all the stuff you have at your disposal. So if you think of it from that simple way, it makes it easier to comprehend. It doesn't seem like this foreign business concept. Different strategies. So we could think of restaurants, for example. What would be some of the capacity planning ideas for restaurants? Yes?
Like how Chick-fil-A has two drive-throughs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think Chick-fil-A is a good example. You're like, well, guess what? Chick-fil-A, the building looks just like a McDonald's. There's a drive-through, circle around the parking lot, you pull up, right? You say Portillo's. Like, what do they do different? Oh, they get people outside taking the order with the machine. Does that help the line move quicker? Yeah, works, right? Does it help them have more, maybe vehicle traffic? Yeah, it probably entices people to be like, man, it's so quick, I'm gonna go there, I don't need to go inside. You get what I'm saying? So they very well thought this out and planned this accordingly, the same with Portillo's. Because also too, they're thinking, we're not McDonald's, not Burger King. What we do is something that seems old-fashioned, right? Seems old-fashioned, people like that, right? It's different. And we said differentiation is extremely important. People value this kind of old, come out and take my order appeal, right? McDonald's said, we care less, just come through and order. So think of all of this as you sort of plan your objective statements. Think like, hey, okay, I got this idea, bless you. Got this idea, sounds great, sounds wonderful, but think of one specific thing. Like, hey, Professor Ross, I'm gonna focus on the traffic that comes through my restaurant. I got a restaurant idea, right? How we funnel in? How do I increase like how quickly we make food, right? I'm gonna have like a Subway line and, I'm gonna have a Chipotle line, right? Someone's gonna work on the beans. Hey, what do you want? Do you want the chicken? Okay, someone's gonna work a move away, right? So think of all of that like when you're thinking of your strategy. All right, capacity by definition, the maximum rate of output of a process or a system. Right? So if you do have a machine, you say, how much can this actual machine produce? Right? How much can it produce under normal circumstances? So we'll talk about circumstances change, right? You do get a surge of people that come through and you can't really handle them, but you plan for that. You do get something that breaks down in the process that you plan. Therefore, you may not be meeting your accepted rate of output or your maximum rate of output. Because we can do so much better if we just increase how efficient we are. So that line at Starbucks, they lost money, 5 people walked away, right? They're like, oh, okay, it cost us money. People were gonna buy more coffee, but our line was so inefficient and how quickly we could get the stuff made, we lost money, right? It costs, everything costs. So you lose customers, it costs you, right? Your thing as business people are to maximize that. And we'll also look at how things change, how that costs, say like for assembly lines, when things break down now, may be more expensive to get the final product out because something was startled in the process, right? And so that per unit cost is now even higher, right? In which case you're like, well, we still gotta sell the product, people aren't gonna buy for anything more expensive than what we already listed it as, therefore we're taking a hit, right? The per unit cost went up, we're gonna take a hit. Now with these objective plans you guys have, right? Coming up with thinking of a project. Now I own a lot of buildings, right? A lot of buildings, apartment buildings, stuff like that. We're working on the hotel chain. And so when they get the contractors to come out, the contractors gotta have a project plan, right? Like, hey, Mr. Ross, we're gonna do the roof, right? This one's gonna need a new roof in about 3 years, or we're gonna need it now. Plumbing issues, tuck pointing, right, an entire building, all sorts of this stuff, right? So your contractor come out, they're like, this is what we foresee this to cost. This is the time frame which we think we can get it completed. This is our start date. This is our projected end date. And if anything unforeseeable things can happen, here are some things we can do, right? So you're gonna see this all the time as you move in business, because it not only just happens in real estate, but it happens in every industry, where they're gonna team you guys up in groups and teams, and you're gonna have a project you're working on, right? Whether you're working in marketing, now you got a new advertisement project coming up with your team members, and you're gonna be proposing these step-by-step strategic plans of how things are gonna work. And the more effective you are to describe in detail just the process, the better off you're gonna be. Most likely you'll be the one getting a promotion, right, while the other people don't, right? So this stuff helps to be a little bit more analytical about reality versus idealism. All right, capacity management, right? We plan for short term, and then we plan for long term. In the long term, we got economies of scale and diseconomies of scale. What do we mean by economies of scale? What's economies of scale?
Just the economy and economical trends of certain demographics.
Yeah, somewhat, I could say. But if you think of economies of scale, think of Coca-Cola assembly line. How does that look?
Probably just costs for different stages of the process.
Yeah, but think Coca-Cola, if they're just making regular Coca-Cola, it's all the same Coca-Cola, right? So you're making a lot of the same thing. And how do you keep the price down? You satisfy demand, and you make more, right? You have a surplus of it or something. And that will keep the unit per cost down. Therefore, you're able to beat your competitors because they don't produce as much soda as we do. They gotta jack up the cost because it costs a lot more to make X amount of their soda. We've made 1 billion Coca-Colas, so their cost per unit has went down. We could beat our competitors on what we're gonna charge, right? Therefore, we drive demand by that. Now, this economies of scale is the opposite. Basically, the unit price goes up because you're not producing something that's very simple, or you're not producing a lot of the same thing. You're making a lot of different things. Think of like a furniture maker. right? So we got Coca-Cola making a lot of one product, and then you got somebody who took an order to make some furniture. Right? You're like, that's gonna be a whole different time frame in which the final product could be put out there, it could be completed. It's gonna take a lot of parts, a lot of more unforeseen circumstances, right? Some things may be made by hand, right? So you're kind of left to human, kind of the human capacity, whether somebody's tired, got this amount of work done, versus maybe automated process where it just constantly flows at the same rate, with different rates. Capacity, timing, and sizing strategies. We just said, hey, all right, Starbucks, 8:30 a.m., you got a long line, right? Now, if you properly plan for that, you'll say, hey, we don't need to have these many people working here all the time, but guess what, at between 8:30 and 10, we got some extra help, right? So you say timing is effective because we know, based on our history, that this is the time we need a lot more capacity to get the coffee out, right? To get it out there to people, quick. And if you do it quick, they'll be back next week. So those are capacity, timing, and sizing strategies. How big is the scale of which you need to increase the capacity to produce whatever it is you're producing? And what's the timing in which you need to do it? All right, and short term for constraint management, right? We have theory of constraints, which is just really thinking about the things that will sort of get in the way, right? There's so many things that can get away of us maximizing our output. And so we'll come across those, we'll talk more. Identification management of bottlenecks, which we could call constraints, right? Say, hey, we're producing so much, but then as the process, it gets narrower and narrower as we get to the finished product, right? And maybe there's more constraints as we get towards the finished product. Maybe things start out really smooth, and then they no longer start out smooth. They become a little bit more technical towards the end. You could think of maybe Apple iPhones. You're like, okay, we pretty much have a good idea of making 10 million units in Shenzhen, China, right? We know a lot of automated processes. We got the parts that go into the phone. But now our bottleneck may be once we get to distribution and sales of the final product. iPhone's finally made. Now our constraint is, do we get it on time out to everybody for September 9th after the great keynote speech in Cupertino, California? Or it's like something happened, shipping the iPhones over on the ships or something. Now we have a bottleneck. People are gonna wait. Guess what? People wait, we lost money. So maybe that towards the end of that process, it gets a little bit more tricky. And then managing constraints in the line process, which is basically more dealing with sort of manufacturing, but also could be in a retail setting as well. Anybody here ever work in the hotel industry? No? No hotels? Now, hotels are notorious for having sort of too much capacity, right? They never meet their capacity, right? Which is sort of the big issue for keeping hotels afloat. That's why you have so many major chains, and it's really hard for people to break in, right, into a hotel. So you got your Best Western, you got your Marriott, you got your Hyatt, but it's hard for other people to keep up because those people have already kind of grounded themselves as a brand. And so even though they take a hit, people are still gonna come there because they're familiar with it. So if you start a new hotel, your thing is, well, how large is the hotel, right? Because you can't have a lot of vacant rooms Cause each room that's vacant, you lose money, right? What are the other amenities you have in there? Do you have continental breakfast? Do you have a bar? Do you have a restaurant? All these different things. But your main thing is you have X amount of number of rooms and they're never 100% filled up. So how do you keep creating more efficiency to get more people in so that not a lot of rooms are left vacant, right? That's sort of my major challenge with my business, which is why I chose castles in Europe. They're made to be extremely small, right? No more than about 12 rooms. They're made for uber rich, ultra luxury, right? That's the methodology. I don't want it to be bigger than that. Because looking at the numbers, it don't make sense because the rooms never get filled up. What are some other industries or markets where you see, or, you know, sort of businesses that you see that they're never at full capacity? Yeah, capacity is an issue for them. Yes?
Maybe like housing, or like the real estate market.
Yeah, so you're saying maybe just regular residential homes? Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of houses on the market, right? So it's never, and if you see that, you see certain neighborhoods and like, wow, there's a lot of houses not being lived in here, which has a really, big effect on the neighborhood, right? So a number of people that are actually living in the neighborhood has an extreme economical effect on everything you see. Less people live in the houses, less businesses, right? Not enough people to spend money to buy the stuff at the businesses in the neighborhood. So you're like, oh, okay, there are no such and such stores in this neighborhood. Why? There's a lot of vacant houses. Nobody lives over, right? Nobody wants to live there. So yes, capacity is definitely relatable in that sense. Where else?
You could make an argument for gas stations. They take a loss on the actual sale of gas, so they need people to go into like the convenience store and buy products, but not a lot of people go in anymore because you could just pay at the pump now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a major challenge, right? Right? If they don't make a profit off the oil, right, off the gas, therefore they have these markets inside. Sometimes they're branded, sometimes they're not. They try to get people to come in and they try different ways. They would get fresh hot dogs and hamburgers, right? And some of them, we're like, okay. We know that maybe a lot of people are transient or truck drivers come through and they need something quick to eat. So how are we trying to create the capacity to get this stuff out, right? To make a profit, in essence. So they try all type of creative ways, you could say, right? Rewards, right? Scan your rewards before you put in your PIN code for your gas. Hot stations, we got pizza, hot dogs, and the ones that don't, you know, they probably don't make any money. They probably lose a lot of money. So yes, gas stations is definitely one of the businesses you'll see there. What else?
Maybe the automotive industry, cause always like, you always go past certain car lots, it's just a bunch of just cars, just, so you kind of just sitting there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're like, well, you're a dealership, you have X amount of cars out there that need to get sold. And so what are the measures you're taking, right? What are the measures you're taking to get this stuff out? You're losing a ton of money every day, but the car doesn't get sold because you still got employees to pay. You still got electric to pay and the mobility and the insurance and all the stuff. So each day that you don't sell a car, you lost a lot of money. By the time you add it all up, even when you do sell a car, you still lost a lot of money because you didn't do it timely, in a timely manner. Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe closed stores, cause they have like a lot of product, they never really sell all of it, so that's why you have like outlet stores where they just send all of their old products to get sold for basically anything they could get for it.
Yeah, I mean, fashion industry, retail, notorious for that, right? Hence why you have clearance sections, right? And if you're, you know, a well-branded name store, then you have an outlet, right? Ralph Lauren Polo outlet, Yes, because the clothing don't get sold, and then it get marked down. So in essence, you're like, well, what does it get marked down to? Right? Does it get marked down 80% of what it originally cost? You're like, wow, some guy bought that at full price, I bought it 80% off. Amount of time difference was 2 months. Maybe if he would have waited 2 months, we got it. You know what I'm saying? So it's extremely important on that time frame as well too. And how they do it. In which case, if you are a retail store, your capacity is, hey, your salespeople or your advertisement is weak, right? So you decrease in capacity for ad budgeting, right? No one knows that you sell this stuff or this store exists. So you have to try all creative ways. The same will go at restaurants. If a restaurant's located in the middle of a block, even if they sell great food, people just walk past it because they're just not paying attention, right? So advertise, like how you expose it, extremely important. In which case you need to increase capacity for ad budget. All right, output measures of capacity best utilized when applied to individual processes or within the firm, or when the firm provides a relatively small number of standardized services and products. And input measures of capacity used for low value and flexible processes, which we just kind of talked about, excuse me. Which we just kind of talked about with furniture stores versus Coca-Cola, right? Furniture stores would be input measures of capacity used for low value and flexible, right? Flexible in the process of which you make the furniture. If things can change, you can grab stuff from here, and switch up. And output measures is just when you focus on individual, when you produce like a standard service or product like Coca-Cola. And that utilization rate is the average output rate over maximum capacity times 100%, right? How much are you utilizing? How much are you utilizing that capacity? Right? So you know that you could produce X amount of units in a normal average setting at 100%, but then we say in reality, coming back to reality, what are we actually producing? You could get that metric from there. All parts of services, products, and business have ideal conditions, right? And non-ideal conditions. You could say, working in retail, you could say, well, non-ideal conditions, guess what? It's a blizzard today. Nobody's coming to buy anything. So you have things that happen all the time, whether it be huge external things like weather, or just issues with employment. You're like, hey, okay, these are non-ideal. Guess what? The union went on strike for teachers. The union went on strike for food workers, right? Nobody's working in the grocery store. There's things that happen. So then ideal conditions just under normal average settings where there's little constraints. All right, man, we said economies of scale is when you lower, when you increase the output, but then you can decrease the cost per unit, right? Like my strategy is to make a zillion screws, right? For people who just have screws to put into wood and things like that. And my price of producing each screw is 1/1000th of a cent because I want to make a zillion. Right? You're like, oh, okay, you got economies of scale. Right? More screws you produce, the less it's gonna cost. Right? But there's some other facets here, right? Reducing construction costs could be an example. Spreading fixed costs. right? So you can have some strategies, you can, okay, I'm gonna cut costs of purchase materials because I'm gonna find a new supplier, right? You don't need to just, get the materials that you use to build things with from one person. You can look around, shop around, and get something from others who may have a better deal. And so find advantages anywhere within that process so that you can decrease the unit per cost, so you can maximize, profit. Right? Or you can maximize, production by getting something quicker than, your competitor from another supplier. Right, this economies of scale, we say a little bit more complex, you're making a special product. Let's say, gym shoes, right? So now you got Jordans, Nikes, Gucci, Prada, and then somebody comes online like, hey man, I know how to take your shoes and I can make a special shoe, right? I can put like my own designs on the shoe, we do customized shoes here. Right, oh, okay, it's cool, it seems like a really cool business, right? And then you look at the amount of time it takes required to do that, because each shoe may be completely different, right? Each customization requires maybe more time, less time than the next. So you're like, oh, okay, well, you're really in this economy of scale. You make a complex statement, right? So you really can't gauge, a stable, I would say, production of income. Right? Your income will be all over the place. Right? There's a loss of focus, right? In which case it's highly inefficient for just making income, I would say. Like, this is great if it's just a passion, but for producing a stable income, I don't know. Short term sounds great, long term it sounds like it wouldn't work that way. Here's a graph showing on the x-axis output rate, right? Patients per week. On the y-axis, average unit cost, dollars per patient. You see economy of scales, we're looking to make the cost per unit, right? Go down, this economy, we're here, 750 beds, but the cost has gone up. Unit cost is increased. So you would say your optimum, right? That maximum output would be here. You have very low average cost per unit, but you're able to do 500 beds in the hospital. So right here would be that sweet spot. Okay, that's where our maximum capacity is. That's awesome. Right? That's where we'll get the best bang for our buck right there. Any questions? All right, size and capacity cushions. Hey, did you build a cushion in? Did you add something over the top, over capacity, just in case something happens, right? Just in case either something fails or the demand increases over capacity. Like, hey, we just want to make sure that we're able to service everybody, even if they exceeded our demand, right? So you create extra suppliers. You create a cushion. Timing and sizing expansions, which goes with the whole theory of, hey, when you increase capacity for time, and what's the size in which you do it, and then linking capacity and other decisions you can make with these strategies. All right, so capacity cushions, the amount of reserve capacity a process uses to handle sudden increases in demand or temporary losses of production capacity, which we measure by the average utilization in terms of total capacity when it falls below 100%. Just as we've seen what 100% would be, anything below that would be not meeting our utilization efficiently. All right, capacity and cushions vary with industry, right? Capital intensive industries prefer cushions well under 10%, while less capital intensive hotel industry, for example, can live with 30 to 40% cushion. What's a capital intensive industry? Where it takes a lot of money to produce the final product.
Cruise ship industry?
Hmm?
Cruise ship industry?
Which one?
Cruise ship.
Cruise ship, yeah, absolutely, right? You're talking about a very, very expensive, boat, lots of different staff, sometimes 100, 500 staff people. Right? The amount of engineering that goes into it, the amount of time it takes to create one of those things. Yes, highly, highly capital intensive. Maybe the final cruise ship costs $3 billion to produce, right? So now how you gonna get that money back? So time is of the essence. Whereas hotel industry, we say, but they already kind of factored that. The hotels already know in this industry, we do not get 100% capacity. Unless you're very small, boutique, bed and breakfast, right? Hence why Airbnb is so effective even amongst investors. Like I have a ton of Airbnbs and like, well, the capacity is 100%. Last day at the house, it's 100% capacity, right? Hotels, you have a lot of rooms, and like, well, it's never filled. We're lucky if we get 70 to 60% capacity, right? So we always gonna have some sort of cushion of rooms to supply to people above what we normally get under ideal conditions. All right, well, in here, any questions? All right, next class, think of some good objectives. I want more people to come.